You're listening to the Recovered Life Show, the show that helps people in recovery live their best recovered lives. And here is your host, Damon Frank.
And welcome back to the Recovered Life Show. I am so glad that you are joining us today. We have a very special episode. I have a guest on today that has taken two paths, one of recovery and one healing in the mental health area. And this is something that's not talked about a lot. And I was so thrilled that he was able to join us today. I'd like to welcome you guys to the show, Cecil Galey Jr. And Cecil is a professional peer support specialist and also with a lot of recovery under his belt, and also has suffered from addiction and schizophrenia simultaneously. And I'm so glad, Cecil, that you're on the show to kind of talk about this, because a lot of people struggle with this and they don't have answers. So thank you so much for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. I want to dive right into this, Cecil, because a lot of people don't understand. You know, they understand addiction. Maybe they've had a friend or family member that has addiction, so they've seen it, but they don't really know about schizophrenia. They don't know what schizophrenia is. They don't know the signs and symptoms of it. And you have going through both these paths at the same time. Can you kind of describe to everybody, you know, what is schizophrenia and, you know, a little bit about your story?
So schizophrenia for me is, I guess I got to go into a little bit of my story first. So I was addicted. In my addiction, I started hearing things, seeing things that weren't there, thinking things that weren't true. And finally got to the point in my addiction that I just couldn't even use anymore. And blessing or no blessing, the schizophrenia is what kind of stopped me in my track from my addiction. But it was, the schizophrenia for me is I had visual and audio hallucinations. I would believe things that weren't, the norm, like maybe hearing messages coming through the TV, talking to me, the radio, thinking that I remember I would think that celebrities were coming to my house. My daughter would be like, no, Dad, Britney Spears isn't coming over tomorrow, and so it became real destructive in my life to the point I couldn't function. So.
Mm. And, you were trying to get sober at this time, right? So it's like probably thinking or you're in active addiction. You're thinking, well, it's just the drugs and alcohol. It's not anything. Yeah. Was that your train of thought?
Well, that is what I thought. I thought, well, it was my addiction. It was my addiction to drugs and alcohol. And like I said, the addiction caused me to, or the schizophrenia caused me to quit using. And then lo and behold, the symptoms of schizophrenia didn't go away. They got worse and worse and worse to the point that I was 3 years sober off of substances before I got any treatment at all for my mental health, because I kept thinking it would go away. And I don't know how much people know about schizophrenia, but I didn't believe at points I didn't believe there was anything wrong with me. I just thought God had started talking to me along the way somewhere, and I found it real odd that God would choose me with my addiction to be the guy he's going to reveal all his deepest, darkest secrets to. So, that's kind of my path I took. My path to recovery for mental health was a little different. I got in some trouble and ended up going through, I don't know if people are familiar with what a specialty court is, but I was, instead of going to prison or going to jail, I was diverted through a specialty court where I first started getting treatment for my mental illness. And that's when my life really changed and started coming together with all the different different things that I learned in that program, and then have continued to learn through for the last 20 years. It's been a journey. So
you know what I loved about your story, and I met you on TikTok on our TikTok live. And what I loved about your story is that you really shine a light on co-occurring disorders and addiction recovery. And the path is different sometimes. And I think one of the problems that we've had is there's a lack of understanding, I think, in 12-step programs and sometimes in therapeutic situations, that the path sometimes is different for people who also have a co-occurring disorder. Can you get into that a little bit? Because I think this is very important. It's like, are they done simultaneously? Because a lot of people say, well, I'm going to deal with the co-occurring disorder, and then I'm going to deal with the addiction, or I'm going to deal with the addiction, but not the co-occurring disorder. Can you tell us a little bit, how is it different than somebody who doesn't have a co-occurring disorder?
So I think for me, one of the biggest differences is that I was put on medication for my schizophrenia, and at the same time I was going through what would be known as an IOP, intensive outpatient, for my drugs and alcohol. And a lot of times, I think I've seen it happen just in what I do day to day. There are some of those programs that don't necessarily believe that you should be taking anything at all, and so and then a lot of cognitive behavior therapy intertwined with my drug and alcohol, and I call it education. The IOP is more about education, I think, and getting some dry time, which I already had the dry time, but it was educating me on my addiction. And so, when all of a sudden, then I had to be educated on my schizophrenia, on, I wanted to know what caused it, what the cause and effect was. And I tried different medications along the way. So, I finally hit on one that worked well for me.
Did you feel at all that there was a stigma with the recovery community? Did you just feel that people just didn't understand it? I mean, were there people like,
I think there's definitely, I think there's definitely a stigma. There are some of those hardcore 12-steppers out there that don't think you should do anything, besides maybe smoke cigarettes and drink coffee. You shouldn't be taking a drug for your mental health. And I've even seen it in people I work with. They'll get into programs, and I won't get into what programs they are or anything, but they think there's other ways around it, that you can just do like a cognitive behavior therapy. And maybe some people can. I'm not one of those people. My day-to-day life and my best recovery is with the medication I take for my schizophrenia, and that helps me be symptom free for my schizophrenia, which in turn allows me to work my program of recovery for addiction. So.
I love that you're shining a light on this, because there is, I have run into this in 12-step groups where, I remember back, years ago, I had ended up sponsoring somebody in a 12-step group that, had bipolar disorder. And there was such, it's co-occurring disorder, and it's common. You will find people that come into the rooms that have this. And, I had to kind of educate myself on it, because I realized that even sometimes the mode of communication and self-care and, was a little different when I was dealing with this person, that I had to be aware that other things were going on. So when we were talking about things like honesty, and we were talking about things like making amends and stuff, the approach was it was the same. It was the same as everybody else was doing, but sometimes the pace was a little bit different and the timing was a little bit different.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that. I had something that happened to me, where I was going through both treatments at the same time, just intertwined. The whole program I was in was intertwined with mental health and addiction recovery. But at one point, I went off my medications a few years in with the help of my prescriber, because I wanted to see if I had healed and whether the schizophrenia was still there. long story short, a year later, I ended up having to go back on medications and still take them to this day. But at that point, someone called when my symptoms came back, my schizophrenia. Someone said, "Well, you relapsed." And I thought, no, I didn't relapse. My symptoms came back because I associated that term relapse as that I had done something wrong, and I hadn't done anything wrong. It just my symptoms happened to come back.
Even the language is different, right? Because for mental health, it's not like an abstinence thing. We kind of know in addiction recovery if we're doing the deal, if we're not drinking and using. But it's not that way, right? With mental health, it's not that way. You will have symptoms arise that you have to treat, and then sometimes the symptoms will go away.
And in my day in life, I see people, maybe aren't quite as lucky, and I'll consider myself lucky that I pretty much live a symptom-free life as long as I take my medication. But I know people that I have a good friend, and they have to their medications quit working from time to time. And it isn't through no fault of theirs, and they have to go in and get a med adjustment, and it's a little different with alcohol. And if you're putting it in your body, you're in a relapse. That's just where you're at. But sometimes through no fault of our own, when we're in dealing with the co-occurring disorder, which like I said, mine's schizophrenia. No fault of my own, I could become actively symptomatic again tomorrow. And, that's no fault of my own. But sometimes I think the two programs, they don't differentiate sometimes. And I've seen that happen, that,
exactly.
Hey, you must have did something wrong. Well,
and you didn't do anything wrong, and this is why I wanted to do this. Your dog is going crazy. Your dog is agreeing with you in the back. It's just, he's agreeing.
My dog's going crazy because I'm talking and I'm the only one in the house right now. And I'm sitting there thinking, I wish the dogs would not be, they're barking. I think someone's coming to get them.
So guys, just for you joining us on the audio version of this, the dogs are also participating in this, and we're fine because we're big dog lovers at Recovered Life. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about this, about how you successfully use 12-step groups, how you successfully use personal achievement things and therapy or whatever that might be with your co-occurring disorder, like how that works. And I love that you tapped on, Cecil, that the language I think needs to change. And that's why I'm so glad that you're coming on here and talking about, like, the thing that you just shared about this person telling you relapse, that could have some serious ramifications for you in your addiction recovery if you believed that. And it's ridiculous. Like, and so I want to dive into about, like, how do you do it? How do you navigate? So if you're there and you have a co-occurring disorder, whether it is schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, BPD, any of the depression, any of this stuff, how do you navigate? We're going to really get into how you do it, Cecil, because you've done it for 2 decades very, very successfully. So after this break, we're going to come back and we're going to dive into that topic. Hold tight. Are you feeling the holiday pressure? It's no secret the holidays can be tough, but you don't have to go it alone. At Recovered Life, we've built a sober TikTok community where we come together to share our breakthroughs and breakdowns. Whether you're sober curious, just starting out, or decades into sobriety, you'll find people who get it. Find and follow us on TikTok. Just search Recovered Life. We post daily updates on our live schedule, so you'll always know when to join the conversation. This season, let's stay connected, stay inspired, and most importantly, live your best recovered life. Follow us now on TikTok at Recovered Life.
Step out of the shadows into the light. Find your tomorrow, start the fight. Recovered Life TV, see the change. Living your best life, it's within reach. Visit recoveredlife.tv.
You're listening to the Recovered Life Show, the show that helps people in recovery live their best recovered lives.
And we're back. I'm talking with Cecil Galey Jr. He has been so kind to come on here. He is a professional peer support specialist, and also has gone down the path of healing from addiction and schizophrenia. Let's dive into this. Let's dive into this, Cecil, because we were talking a little bit about how to use the 12-step groups, how to use therapy and things like that when you have a co-occurring disorder, because you might have people that are trying to help you, or you might have people that are telling you things that maybe don't fit in well with the other types of healing that you're doing from co-occurring disorders. How did you do that? Because you've done it for 20 years very successfully.
So, for me, I did a lot of 12-step stuff before I ever got any real recovery. I do a little bit of it now, not much, because of the simple fact in what I do from day to day, it keeps me in the recovery realm. And plus I've done so much treatment on cognitive behavior therapy, which is when you go in and if you change the way you think about something, it changes the emotion that's related to it. But I can tell you this. I think it's more common to see people nowadays, if I go to a 12-step meeting, that have a co-occurring disorder than back in the early days. The early days, people didn't want to talk about it. You were another breed. You weren't. You almost weren't welcome at the meetings. If in the early days, if I had went, and I did 12 steps from the time I was a teenager up until just before, pretty active in it, up until just before I actually got clean. And if you disclosed in the early days you had schizophrenia or bipolar or something like that, you almost were shunned in a lot of ways. There was always going to be exceptions to that. There was going to be people that, understood, wanted to know more about it, or would come to you on the side and say, hey, I've got that going on too. And I think it's a lot more common than people want to give credit for. But 12-step was good for me. It's not active in my life this right now, this day. I'm not an active member of any 12-step group, good or bad, either way. But I have, I live my life now. I'm trying to live off, to then enjoy and celebrate some of the fruits of my labor,
Yes,
and not get stuck in that spot. I try to give back, and like I said, occasionally I go, and usually it's to go with someone that I'm working with, or someone that maybe needs a hand getting to a meeting or something like that. So,
yeah, I think also working in recovery, you're seeing this so much. What do you think the biggest misconception is with people who are diagnosed? Because I think the panic probably of knowing that, we always call this with, Al-Anon and AA, they called them double winners, right? You have to go to Al-Anon and AA, but some people now are triple winners, right? So they have a co-occurring disorder. They have all these things going on. What do can you talk about that fear? Because there's got to be a lot of fear, especially if people get sober first and feel, all right, not that they totally have recovery figured out, but they feel like, all right, I've just got my head above water now, and now I'm hit with this. It's like, forget about it. How am I going to recover? What would you tell those people?
Well, it's possible, and it's more likely to happen that you'll get some type of recovery from mental illness than not. I think the biggest misconception is it's like a death sentence. If you're diagnosed with schizophrenia, I think back in the day, and maybe even to some aspect today, that people look at that as a death sentence, that your life's never going to get any better, and you're going to be stuck there. That's not true. With the medications they have nowadays and the treatments they have and stuff, you are just as likely to be someone like me that's living their life to their fullest and work in recovery, as same recovery as I work for my addiction, work for my mental health. I see it all the time. I know people, I have good friends that maybe suffered from depression and stuff, and they're not there anymore. I have a good friend that made many attempts in his life, and he's not there anymore. And that's because of all the treatment and the different things he's been through. But so I think the biggest misconception is that we don't recover. That we can't recover, and we do, and we will. It's no different than addiction recovery. If you put the work in, you'll get a result.
You know what? I love that you're saying that. And thank you so much, Cecil, because I have to tell you, I heard that when I came in. I didn't have a co-occurring disorder like this, but I will tell you, I heard that with people who are struggling with co-occurring, and they would tell them double down, especially people with depression, double down. And I think people read, and this is no discredit to the book of Alcoholics Anonymous, which I love and has saved my life. But I will tell you, a lot of people look at it and they see Bill's story, and Bill had depression. Bill talks about having depression in there, and he never really got a handle on that. Although he had physical substance recovery, he never really got that. And I think a lot of people now with the knowledge are like, I don't want to live Bill's story. I don't want to be sober and miserable. I don't want to struggle with a co-occurring disorder, not treat it, not look at it. And I think the fear keeps people from exploring that. So you're saying that there's help out there. There's a lot more people in recovery, is what you're saying, that really suffer from this.
Yeah, maybe I'm jaded because I work in the recovery field, but I see there's a lot of help out there. As a person, I think is a person going to always ask for it, or are they ready for it? No, but I think once you are ready for it, there's no lack of people willing to help you, and that goes for addiction, and that goes for mental illness too. I see it every day. So,
absolutely. In closing here, what would be the message, Cecil, for somebody who is suffering from this and just totally freaked out right now? Like they might have just gotten a diagnosis that they just did not know. They just did not know they were going to get this, or they are just starting to piece together. And look, Cecil and I are not doctors, so you're going out and doing that. You have to consult the professional people who can do that. But there's people right now that are listening to this. We see them in the TikTok room all the time, Cecil, that they're grappling with this, and they're like, what would be your message of somebody who's done this 20 years successfully? What would be your message to them?
Well, I think first thing, when you're first diagnosed, don't freak out. Know that there is help out there, whether you think there isn't or isn't, because it's pretty devastating when you first start experiencing symptoms, or you actually get the official diagnosis. It can be totally devastating, but know that you can recover. You can recover from that as well as you can recover from, like, if you got a cancer diagnosis and they treat you for cancer. It's no different. It's no different at all with the medications and the different type of counseling and the different kinds of treatment you can get. It's no different. Lots of people survive cancer, and lots of people survive addiction and co-occurring disorders. So,
absolutely. I'm so glad that we were able to have you on today and really talk about, hope, that there is hope out there for people. And you're saying there is more, there is a solution. And that's what I wanted to, that's what I wanted to bring up here, that it's not over. The journey is not over just because you got this diagnosis. Cecil, thank you so much for coming on the show. Guys, if you guys are a Recovered Life TV member or a TikTok subscriber, I'm going to be doing a little sit down right after the show. So he's going to hold on here after the show, all about going a little bit more in depth for a couple minutes. So join us on TikTok, and you can find out more about that and hear that there. Cecil, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me, Damon. I appreciate it.
Hey, if you like this episode, think about supporting us by becoming a Recovered Life Plus member. At Recovered Life TV, we're not just delivering premium recovery resources, we're empowering you with the knowledge and tools that make a real difference in the quality of your recovery. By subscribing, you gain access to ad-free content, expert insights, exclusive video and audio segments, special projects, plus so much more, all while supporting our mission to spread the recovery message far and wide. Whether you're seeking to deepen your understanding or stay updated on the latest addiction and mental health recovery trends, Recovered Life Plus is for you. Subscribe now and start living your best recovered life. Just go to recoveredlife.tv and become a Plus member today.